What you just heard from our two doctors is a historical and contextual foundation for the conversations that are about to take place this afternoon. So we're going from the past and into the present. The current chapter will be from 9 representatives of Harlem Theater that are this current iteration of this whole really 200-year-old striving for the image war. We're projecting the untrammeled self. This is an important framing idea that we'll discuss in a little bit. So thank you both for that. We have living memory and history next, where my colleague Woodie King Jr., who helped to organize this event with me, will be with a very special guest, William B. Branch, and we'll give a few moments for them to set up, and they'll hand it off to Woodie. Thank you.
I think it's already said. That's great.
Can we turn the lights on? I'm walking up like that.
That's great.
This mic's also coming up.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. See this one. Some 25, 30 years ago, Ruben Silva said, Woody, why don't you come and be a part of the National Theater Conference? And so I said, wow, let me read about it. I read about it, and it's an unusual and very great history. So all that time, I think I missed a couple of meetings, but it's something to always learn. And when Benny talked about coming up to Harlem, I had just gotten really off another project that Benny had instigated, and the people never even mentioned Benny instigated. I said, oh my God. It was with TCG, where we're doing a history of African American practitioners. And I was talking to the filmmaker, and she told me Benny had put it together. I said, but isn't he going to be interviewed? Isn't he going to be a part of it? Quiet. So Benny, this is one I always wanted to be a part of, so thank you. Okay. What happened is we were talking about Harlem Theater and coming to the American Negro Theater. And this brilliant man, this playwright, and I've done one of his plays, so if I say he's a playwright, I've done his play in Splendid Era. A great production. And we were on the same flight going down to Winston-Salem in 2011 when he got the award from the National Black Theater Festival. And when this came, I said, wow, we need to have a conversation with him about theater. And I had mistakenly heard one of his stories thinking it was in Anna Lucastle. You remember we talked about you and your fight with William Marshall. It wasn't Anna Lucastle. So we went across the street today. He looked at the exhibition. I said, all I want to do is ask you about what memories does that bring back, having been a part of that Anna Lucastle historic production. So, what memories does it bring back?
Well, I watched viewing the exhibition this afternoon brought back not only memories, but also the fact that there was a great deal involved in the exhibition that frankly I didn't know. I must point out first that I was never actually a member of the American Negro Theater. By the time I got to New York to live permanently, the American Negro Theater was unfortunately in its last gasps, you might say. I did, however, have the great fortune of knowing and working with a good many of the people who came out of the American Negro Theater, and actually many who were still in the American Negro Theater when I was in Anacostia. Now, how did I get into Anacostia? There's a lot of background that would like that question that I won't have time to go into this afternoon in about 3 hours. that might be sufficient. But the fact of the matter is that in 1945, I was one of the few young African Americans who were able to get a college education. And compounding that, I went to Northwestern University, which is just north of Chicago in Evanston, Illinois, and enrolled in their famous School of Speech. And shortly thereafter, an attraction came into the Chicago theater that I definitely wanted to see. It was a production of Shakespeare's The Tempest, headed by Vera Zorina, Arnold Moss, and Canada Lee. Canada Lee playing Caliban. You must understand that during those days there were very few opportunities for African Americans to do such roles as Canada Lee in Caliban. He had done a movie or two, but again, he was the lone African American figure in the whole damn movie. Anyway, he had gained enough stature so that he had become a Broadway attraction. Now, I later found out, I didn't know it at the time, that he had opened in New York with Anna Lucas to help with the reviews of the box office. He was already in rehearsal for Caliban in The Tempest, and shortly after the opening, he left and joined the cast of The Tempest, which played a very short engagement in New York, and then went on tour, the first stop being Chicago. Well, I went down to see The Tempest, and afterwards I said I really would like to meet him, but who am I, as a freshman at school, to go backstage and ask to meet the great Canada Lee. So I left the theater and went to the elevated platform leading up to the Chicago Loop train. And I was about to put my dime in the slot. It was only a dime in those days. When I said to myself, well, look, Hal, the worst they can do is say no, and that certainly isn't going to hurt you. So I turned around and went back to the theater and the stage door and asked to see Canada Lee. The stage doorman said to me, he's upstairs with some friends right now, but he'll be down very shortly. If you stand over there, when he comes down, I will refer him to you. I did. He came down and he came over, and in these kinds of circumstances, it would be understandable if he really smiled, shook my hand, and had a word or two, and then went back to what he was doing. But no, he took an interest in me. He asked me what I was doing, and showed great interest in the fact that I was at Northwestern and at a theater major. And he said to me at that time, well, how would you like to have a job in the theater? Well, as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, theater majors would kill. To make a long story short, he told me that Anna Lucasta had just come to town and they were looking for understudies locally. What had happened was the savvy producer, an English producer by the way, of Anna Lucasta, after having established it as a hit on Broadway, moved the original cast to Chicago and put in a new cast in New York, headed by a little actress named Ruby Dee, whereas the original was headed by Hilda Sims. Well, I followed his instructions. He told me to tell the director, Harry Waxstuck Gribble, that Canada Lee sent you. I said, all right. So I followed his instructions, and again, without going into further detail, I wound up as a member of the cast of Anna Lucasta while still a freshman at Northwestern. Now I continued with my classes, but of course in the evening and afternoons and matinees and all the rest of it, I was involved in the production in Chicago. Now, when they were about to leave Chicago to continue their tour, the question arose, well, am I going to go with them? Am I going to give up my scholarships at Northwestern? And of course, not of course, but I decided, well, no, I'm going to stay in school, which I did. A year later, the company came back again, and there had been changes in the company, and I met some of the new people in the company, and the man who had taken my place, whom I hadn't met before, was a young man who smiled a lot. I wasn't very impressed with it, but he smiled a lot, and we met. But you've heard of him since, I think. That was Sidney Poitier.